Hi team, I wanted to clarify that myself and my guest actress Jess Rolland recorded this episode at the beginning of July, which was prior to the announcement of the SAG-AFTRA strikes. We stand in full solidarity with both the WGA and SAG-AFTRA. Without the labour of the writers and actors currently on strike, films would not exist. Hello and welcome to Fats on Film. This is the podcast where we talk about all things fat representation in film, TV, and wider media. I am your host, Hannah Ogilvie, and this week I am joined by actress and host of the Better Than Bad podcast. It's Jess Rolland. Hello, Jess.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm good. The sun is shining and I'm feeling great.
I'm asking my guests all the time at the moment. Are you a sun person or are you a more rainy, wintry kind of gal?
So I used to think that I was like an autumn girly. And then this year I discovered that I'm not an autumn girly at all.
Okay.
I'm a summer girly. Because the sun came out and I was like, suddenly had all this motivation and my mood improved so much. And I was like, am I a summer girly?
The whole time?
The whole time? No way. I was like, no way. I was like, oh, how did I not realize this before? I've been alive for 28 years. Did I not realize?
I mean, at least you're not 38, you know? Yeah. At least you're still like in the the first quarter or first third of the life. So you got 2/3 still to go. We can enjoy summer, have the best time. I have always been a summer girly. I have no shame in that. I grew up in Spain, so like my summers were in the beach, at the pool parties. Nice. Honestly, it's a very privileged childhood, I'm not gonna lie. And then I moved here and then I found out what seasonal affective disorder was, and I was like, holy shit, like this is dark, like literally and figuratively very dark. So I am very excited when the sun comes out. As much as like I don't love the heat because we can't deal with it here. Like I literally say to my partner, should we invest in like an aircon company? Because I think people are going to be buying them soon. I really, really do.
Yeah. That's your $1 million idea.
That's my $1 million idea. No one steal it. That is mine. Anyway, Jess, we are here because we're here to talk about, I really big up all the films we do on this podcast, but this truly is like a pop culture giant. We're talking about Mean Girls.
Yeah.
Mean Girls. And I mean, you mentioned you're 28. Hold on, how old am I? I think I'm 31. I always forget. It's either 31 or 32. No, it's 31 because we're in 2023. And so like we grew up with this film. This is, unfortunately, this is a big part of my DNA. Is that part of your DNA?
Yeah, it's kind of like a rite of passage, I think, for people around our age range.
Yeah.
Which is very weird considering, I mean, you'll go into this when you do your spiel about when it came out and stuff, but it came out in 2004. Like,
I know.
I was in year 4 when that came out. There's no way I was watching this when this first came out. I didn't watch this until I was in secondary school, and it still had the staying power. It still seems to have it now. It's very strange how it just kind of latched onto the cultural like area.
Yeah, like it really, again, we're teasing it, but it really does get into a psyche of what a teenage girl is, like in very impressive ways. So yeah, let's get into it. So Mean Girls is a 2014 comedy directed by Mark Waters, who also did Ghosts of Girlfriends Past, which was that Ryan Reynolds film, and the She's All That sequel, He's All That, with that TikTok person. I'm really showing my age.
that TikToker,
that one. Written by the absolutely wonderful Tina Fey of SNL and 30 Rock fame. It's based on the Rosalind Wiseman's 2002 book Queens, Bees and Wannabes, starring, this cast: Lindsay Lohan, Rachel McAdams, Lacey Cuthbert, and Amanda Seyfried as our essential Mean Girls, and obviously Tina Fey's in supporting. You've got Tim Meadows, you've got Lizzie Kaplan, Amy Poehler. I should not forget Amy Poehler. And interestingly, we have a made-for-TV sequel that was released in 2011. I have not seen it. Have you seen it, Jess?
No, I didn't watch it.
No, so we cannot. I'm sure it's great. Sure, like I'm sure it's great. And we have a musical premiered on Broadway in March 2018, and it was announced in 2020 that a movie adaptation of the musical would be made, and I believe that's being released next year. It made $130 million at the box office, which is awesome for a teen comedy directed at girls to make that much money. I'm like, yes, get it. Especially lauded. And when I read this, I don't know why, my insides went squee. Especially lauded by the critics was Lohan's acting, which earned several accolades, including 3 Teen Choice Awards and 3 MTV Movie Awards. And in 2021 was listed the 11th best performance of the 21st century by the New Yorker. I mean, a praise for Lilo. Like, we've always known. I like, I don't have to. I feel like if you're a Lindsay Lohan gal, you know, she's been a massive part of our childhood. To know in 2021 the New Yorker is still going like, yeah, you know what, she was darn good. I'm like, yes she was. Yes she was. I will bang
she kind
of
always is.
She's brilliant. She's been brilliant since Parent Trap. She's been brilliant in that Christmas film that was on Netflix last year. Loved it.
She's great.
I love her. I hope she is having her best life. Right, Jess, can you please let me and the listeners know, what is Mean Girls all about?
So Mean Girls follows the story of a girl called Katie who moves to school for the first time. She's been living in Africa with her parents for her whole life, and she knows nothing about high school, and she kind of becomes embroiled in this scheme to bring down the Queen Bee. And chaos ensues.
I mean, like any kind of like teen romp, you have to have a chaos ensues moment. So, Jess, let's start this podcast off by talking about our relationship with Mean Girls. So we already mentioned we were, you know, younger when this film came out. You were a bit younger than me. When you first saw this, or like I guess like over the X amount of times you've seen it, how has this impacted you and who you are today?
Kind of a weird one, because it was one of those films where everybody that I went to school with was like, it was a really random moment where everyone just started talking about it. Like, I'd heard of this film, and then all of a sudden in like 2009 they were all like, have you seen Mean Girls? Have you seen Mean Girls? Have you seen Mean Girls? I think we were just of that age suddenly where it was like you're going through the list of like teen girl films, and we had loads that came out at that time. We had like Saint Trinian's, Wild Child, Angus Thong's Perfect Snogging. Like, there were all these films that came out around the same time that kind of encapsulated the teen girl feeling. And Mean Girls was no different, except in a way it was, because it's a lot more I'm gonna go raunchy is the word I'm gonna use. It's a lot more it feels a lot more like adult than the other teen ones.
Agreed.
And I think there was a part of me when I watched it, because I didn't know anything about it. I was like, everyone's talking about this film, I'm just going to watch it. And when I watched it, there was a part of me that felt like I was watching this big like adult film almost, because it was just like this, but it still captured everything that people feel. Because unfortunately, you know, cliques and all of that, they do exist in real life and in schools, and wanting to fit in is a very, you know, it's an experience that a lot of girls go through. It's a very normal thing. So to see that on screen, and obviously it's a comedy, so it's really enjoyable to watch at the same time, and you're watching them go, oh no, how are they doing that? Why are they doing that? But it's one of those films where I still quote it to this day. I'll have random moments where we'll just suddenly be quoting things, or I'll remember something that I find really funny, and I'll be talking to my friends and like, oh my God, remember that line, it's in Mean Girls and all of this stuff. And it's kind of that it shaped me in different ways as well. There's been some negative, there's been some positive, which we'll get into. But for the most part, it's just become one of those staple films that even when I went back to it this time and I'm looking at it from a much more critical lens, I still couldn't help but enjoy it in the overall sense, even though I was watching and going, oh, this has not aged well.
Oh my God. When Jess, you're echoing my thoughts entirely. Watching it yesterday, I literally tweeted saying, I haven't seen this film probably in 10 years. But I have seen it. I would have thought at least 30 times. Like you know, it's one of those things I haven't needed to see it. And also, if you're on the internet at any point, you're probably already watching it, because like the memes, you know, the memes that came out of this is just, it's wild to think 20 years on we are still memeing the hell out of this film in very I don't know, current ways. And actually, one of the things you mentioned earlier about how like it seems like it latches on to every generation, like everyone seems to still be watching it. Tina Fey said the reason why she chose the word fetch that Gretchen Wieners keeps trying to introduce is because she thought if she actually used like a cool word, like a current word, it would age it. And I'm like, genius, so smart. There's a reason why. Yeah, she is like who she is. That's so clever. But yeah, I was watching it yesterday and I just thought, oh my God, this is so problematic. I had no idea. Like I was consuming this without challenging it, without like internalizing it. But I still had a great time. You know, that's the thing. Like when we look at, I say this a lot in this podcast. We know this film is 19 years old. We know things have changed. It's just one of those things where like now we can recognize it and go, oh, maybe we wouldn't say that nowadays. Like there were a couple of drops of the R word in parts of this film. I was like, oh, okay, we're going in strong.
We've moved on.
We have moved on. But yeah, I think it's still super enjoyable. This film, I can't remember when I first watched it, but I remember it being advertised on like MTV, and they were like, you know, big film. You know, I think they were doing like competitions where you could like, you know, get merchandise and stuff like that. And I was like really curious because I loved Lindsay Lohan. Who doesn't? Who loves Freaky Friday? Who doesn't? So yeah, I was really curious. And then again, this film was everywhere. Like the soundtrack was everywhere. And even like things where they talk about, I mean, I know it's such a simple thing, it's the main premise of the film, but the popular girls, like just the fact that like they are representing these popular girls who everyone was scared of but also wanted to be. And I definitely had that in my year at school, like this group of popular girls. So I can't remember what we used to call them when I was in Scotland. But when I moved to Spain, we called the like popular girls, they were just basically a group of blonde girls, and actually were quite nice. They weren't mean, they just were popular, you know. But we used to call them the Barbies. And then there was like a male counterpart to that group, and this is so dumb, and this really shows like how kids are not smart. Instead of calling them the Kens, which is the obvious name for the boy version of this group, we called them the male Barbies.
Like yeah, you missed out on a prime opportunity.
I know. I'm like, why did you do that? It's so foolish. But yeah, so this was representative of our lives, you know, these mean girls, the plastics. So why did you want to bring on Mean Girls onto this podcast when we talk about fat representation in cinema?
I found it quite an interesting one because something that I noticed when I watched it this time is that, and it's kind of really frustrating when you watch it, because if they weren't all playing into some really harmful stereotypes, this has got a really diverse ensemble cast.
Yes.
Like in terms of what you see in, because I don't know about you, but I'll watch some teen-based dramas, things like Euphoria, Skins, that sort of stuff.
Love.
And, you know, great. But then there's like one fat person in the entire school. And I'm like, where are all the other ones?
I know.
and it's like there's just like one of each other group of people, you know? And so it was kind of, I was watching, I was like, wow, considering this came out in 2004, you've got a really diverse like ensemble cast. Obviously the main cast is very particular of you know, the normal typical thing that they do in film, eye roll, but you know, they have a pretty diverse ensemble cast, but they're all playing into these stereotypes. And I thought it was kind of an interesting film to discuss, because it's not that there's obviously discussions of weight and whatnot, and it's used in a very particular way, but it's not, I don't think it's necessarily something that people would first think of if you went fat representation in film. I don't think people would necessarily go, oh, Mean Girls, because that's not what the film's about per se, but it's weight and fatness and whatnot are used in a very particular way in the film that I thought would be quite interesting to discuss.
Yeah, totally. I agree. I think it was on the list because I definitely think it's come up more so in recent times. I feel like I've been reading a lot more about the criticism of the plan to bring down Regina George, Rachel McAdams' character. Oscar worthy performance, please. Like, genius. I mean, I love Rachel McAdams. Anywho, I mean, I love all of them. I love all of them. But yeah, I think the plan to bring her down, enacted by KD, Janice, Ian, and Damien. So we have three things, three pillars they want to bring her down with. And that is get rid of the boyfriend and Aaron Samuels. I mean, who didn't fancy Aaron Samuels? Like, they couldn't have picked a better person. Get rid of her army of skanks, which in Gretchen and oh my god, Karen. Oh, how could I forget Karen? Oh, bless her. And then the third thing is to ruin her hot bod. Which again, like, you know, I've watched this film many times and I never really clocked that. I never really challenged that before I watched it this time. And I was like, that is an incredibly toxic thing to say. And, you know, with those three pillars, they're saying, well, this is what's keeping Regina George at this level of popularity, of royalty. You know, when we first meet Regina George, she's coming in on the shoulders of these boys, right? You know, she's literally being carried in like a queen. And so, like, how do we knock her off the throne? We've got to knock these three pillars. And the fact that one of them is her body, like her physical, not just appearance, not like, you know, not to uglify her, but it is by making her like gain weight. That is literally what they want to do. They want her to gain weight. And I was like, God, I just watched that when I was 12 years old. And there's no way I didn't internalize that because of then my relationship with food, not just with me, but like all of the girls I knew, right? It's so normalized, that way of viewing your body, watching what you're eating. Again, with Regina, there are so many examples that I clocked this time where she's looking at what she's eating. Oh, you know, how many carbs, or what's the percentage of fat in the carbs. She's doing a cranberry juice cleanse, but it's like cranberry, like fizz cocktail. Thank you so much. You know, she wants to lose 3 pounds. And I'm like, oh my God, Regina, baby, like, this isn't fun. And it really broke my heart, actually. And also, I mean, I don't know if this is just a sign of my age, but I was watching it this time, and I don't know whether this is the point, Hannah, or I've hit something quite interesting. I don't know. I can't work it out. But I actually don't think Regina is that horrendous. I think she's bad. Don't get me wrong. I think she's bad. But I think Janice is really bad. She is
100%.
She is so manipulative of KD. That first time when they meet, so they bring Janice and Damien, you know, go to KD. I love the like, is this your natural hair color? It's gorgeous. And he's absolutely right. Lindsay Lohan's natural hair color is gorgeous. And he like grabs the hair like, this is the one I want. This is the color I want. And they take her to the back building, which burned down in 18, blah, blah, blah. And she goes, are we not going to get in trouble? And Janice says, we're your friends. Why would we get you in trouble? And I was like, Janice, that's the most manipulative thing I have ever heard.
She's a little demon.
Yeah. And I know she addresses at one point, she goes, at least me and Regina know we're mean, but you think you're not. And so she does address it to a point, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because I guess like one of them's mean but has so much social power to enact her meanness, where Janice is mean and doesn't have any social status. She can't wield it in the same way maybe she would like to. So she uses KD in order to enact the meanness by making Regina gain weight.
Yeah.
With the plan to make Regina gain weight in order to lower her social status, like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, I can't help just think it's the most toxic thing in the world, especially when I think about the target audience. But I appreciate I'm leading the witness. So what are your thoughts with that one?
I mean, I do think it is a very like toxic thought process. And I think in a way, part of me feels like, and I might just be giving Tina Fey a bit too much credit here, but part of me, having watched it again, part of me feels like it was almost like to kind of show the ridiculousness of the whole situation, because Regina's going, I want to lose 3 pounds, and like 3 pounds, if you lose it, it's not really going to do much in the grand scheme of things. And she's asking all these stupid questions like, is butter a carb? And they're all like, yeah. And I feel like part of it was to kind of show a bit of ridiculousness, but I don't think that would have come across to the target audience. So I don't know if that is the case, which maybe because I'm watching it as an adult now, I kind of see it in a different light. But it is kind of one of those things where you can't not internalize that, because it's basically just essentially saying, if you're bigger, you're less than. That's what it's saying, right? It's that there's no other way to really interpret that, even if it is like ridiculous, like stupid little things that she's saying. It's the big thing going on there is that they're essentially, saying that if you are a bigger person, then you're not viewed in as higher esteem as someone who's thinner. So it becomes really difficult to watch it. And also just like the whole idea in general, like that, my attitude towards, like, if people want to lose weight, that's their business, none of my business. I don't ask questions. I don't expect people to ask me questions about my weight. It's no one else's business except for your own. And so if Regina's there going, I want to lose 3 pounds, even if I was to look at her and go, oh, why do you need to do that? None of my business. Absolutely. And so unless they're doing it in a dangerous way, in which case we gotta maybe make it our business. But she, so to then go and someone who wants to lose weight and be like, I'm gonna make them gain weight, that's honestly one of the meanest things I think you can do, because it just spirals someone, surely. Awful. I can't think of anything meaner to do to someone in terms of just like basically taking any control they have over their body and what they want to do to it, and just flipping it on its head, because for what? Just to dethrone her. Yeah,
totally. Like when I would watch it, I was like, this is like, sure, they could genuinely get charged, because it's like almost like I'm like akin to like poisoning. Like you're giving her something which is she thinks is doing one thing, but it's actually doing the other. They're gaslighting her. So when she goes to try on the spring fling dress in 135, it doesn't fit, and she goes like, Katie, like these bars suck. And she goes, oh, this is just all your water weight. Once it goes, you'll knock however many pounds like that. And it's just like, this poor woman, like, she's just like, what is going on? I'm being told one thing, my body's doing another. Again, where we have the big kind of moment where Karen and Gretchen confront Regina for wearing sweatpants on a Monday. They're like, you can't sit with us, the rules. And she goes, these are the only things that fit me right now. And like, it just really broke my heart, because I'm like, well, Katie knows why. Gretchen and Karen have been like turned against her via Katie's action, so they've like lost all kind of sympathy for her anyway. And then not only that, she walks off, bumps into a fat person, one of the fat girls at school, and that fat girl goes, watch it, fat ass. And then you have the whole canteen laugh at her, and we get this really horrible shot of her bum in the sweatpants, and it's obviously been stuffed because obviously Rachel McAdams isn't a big person, so they've had to put her in some kind of padding, into some kind of fat suit. And I was just like, great, so we're also meant to laugh as an audience, we're meant to laugh at this bigger bum stuffed into these sweatpants. Well, I feel great.
Yeah, and also the choice to have one of the fat girls be the one to say,
yes,
which was obviously, I doubt that was like an on the fly decision. I imagine that was something that they would have been in the script, like they were going to have this specific person, 100%. Because it adds more, excuse the pun, it adds more weight to the situation. It just makes it sort of like, kind of like almost, I imagine in Regina's head, that's like the worst case scenario, right? Like all these people calling you fat, and then the fat girl's the one that calls you fat. It's like, oh, now it must be true,
Well, not only that, but also you can imagine when Regina was at her, peak of social status, that girl would never have said anything to Regina, right? Because she's terrified of her, from a social status point of view. Regina's a much here, and because the film has established, if you have more weight on your body, well, then you must be lower in the social hierarchy. But because Regina is gaining weight, they're coming together in the social status. So now this nameless woman feels that she can actually call Regina out. And it's just, again, so now she can be a bully because Regina's gay. It's just really twisted. And I again, like, I know the film isn't wanting me to, but as an adult looking back, I really do feel for Regina. I know she's an arsehole. And I know the whole film was about how teenage girls can be arseholes. I mean, fucking hell, I was an arsehole because, you know, I was a teenage girl, didn't really have developed the social awareness of the world yet. But then to watch this, I don't know how she meant to be like 16, 17-year-old girl be like absolutely crucified in not, and the thing is, it's not even like, it is obviously mental warfare, but it is physical as well. Like, they are making a choice to fuck with her physically. And I don't know why. I mean, it's all bad. I'm not trying to say one's worse than the other, but it really just shows like how nasty Katie and Janice are. I do kind of put Damien a bit over here. He's just there for the ride. I don't think of him as culpable somehow. But yeah, I just find it really distressing. And obviously we have the choice as well. We mentioned it when we exchanged emails. We have the choice the film makes, which is to put Regina in some kind of padding to accentuate the fact she is gaining weight. And we have another use of fat suits, or I guess maybe like a partial fat suit in a situation. We've brought up on the podcast a few times. I fucking hate them. What's your opinion on fat suits?
This might be a long segue. I'm sorry, listeners.
Please go. Please go.
I really despise fat suits on so many levels. As an actor, they annoy me because something I've sort of come to realize within this industry is that, because to reference this and understand why I'm saying this, I listened to or read an interview with Sarah Paulson. And
yes.
she wore a fat suit for her role in American Crime Story Impeachment. And for one, she's wearing a fat suit to not even play a fat person. So that's just something in itself. She's just they made her just look slightly bigger than what she is, which was frustrating to see in itself. But in this interview, because people kind of called her out for it and said, why are you wearing this fat suit? It's really like disrespectful and unnecessary. And one of the things she said was that an actor wants to transform, right? They want to become a completely different person. And the reason why fat suits annoy me is because that right for transformation is only ever gifted to the thin. And it really annoys me because a fat actor will never be in the room for a thin role with the idea that they might want to lose weight for that role. They'll never be in the room for certain things. The only roles they will ever be in the room for are very specific, like to their size, pretty much. I mean, sometimes there's some variances, like places are getting better, but for the most part, it is you are in the room auditioning for jobs that are about what you look like. But then a thin actor can put on a fat suit and become a completely different person and have that lovely transformation that people want to have because they want to feel distance from who they are so that they can play this character in its fullest and blah, 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 blah. But that's something that's not allowed to happen to anyone really other than like a thin white actor. And it's really frustrating to see. But also the other reason I hate fat suits is because 9 times out of 10, they're used to sort of caricature a fat person. And there's some instances where I can kind of take a step back and go, okay, I'll let it slide. One that I recently watched was the film adaptation of Matilda the musical. And they use a very like exaggerated fat suit on Emma Thompson in that. It's designed to be a caricature based on the fact that in the book the character was a bit of a caricature. There's a whole issue with that in itself, like why is the fat person always the villain? What's going on there? But also in the stage production, Miss Trunchbull is usually played by a man.
Yes.
You then put them into this sort of like exaggerated drag to kind of like give this idea of whatever they're trying to put out there. So when I watched that, as annoying as it was to see someone in a fat suit again, I was like, guys, come on, we've moved past this. Those are the types of ones that I can kind of take a step back and go, okay, there's a stylistic approach to this, if I'm making any sense. It still pisses me off, but I can kind of take a little step back. But when it's used in a way that's just kind of like there to mock or even to just like transform, I say in air quotes, it frustrates me. I just find them really offensive, because ultimately just cast a fat actor. Like, it really is that simple.
I mean, I just want to really highlight how eloquently you put that it is a gift of transformation that's only allowed or only accessible to thin white actors. I think that's a perfect way of explaining it. I I'm not an actor. I've never done any training. I don't know the process, but ultimately I'm thinking, do you genuinely need that? Like, do you not have enough, like, I don't know, training in your head that you could get into that person's mindset without the need for a fansuit? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a weird one, because sometimes for some actors, like, it is one of those things where you go through, say you're doing a stage play, and you go through all your rehearsal, and then you put the costume on, and suddenly your physicality changes because the costume's on. So I played in my final year of uni, I played we did the musical Big Fish, and there's a character in that, the witch, and I played the witch.
Cool.
And she's got this really big belty number, and it was so much fun. And the
Sounds
costume
great.
that they got was this massive, I'll send you a picture later on, there was this massive coat that had all these different pieces of fabric on it, and it was really heavy. So I'd done the whole rehearsal process, and the minute that went on, the way I moved just had to change, because I couldn't hold myself the way that I had been, because it's heavy, and it didn't look right for me to just sort of strut on stage like because I had this big heavy coat on. So sometimes costuming, like things like shoes, people like to rehearse in their shoes straight away because they feel like they walk in a different way. Those things can sort of inform your character. But in terms of like a fat suit, obviously, for like, if it's a film that's imitating some sort of like real life thing, so like a real life person, they'll put a fat suit on to imitate that person. But then that's when I'm like, just hire someone who's already of that size, because surely that's going to be cheaper for the film. Let's save some money.
Literally.
But also, it's when I just kind of don't like it, where it's kind of, people do it just as the butt of a joke. Like, it happened in one of the Avengers movies, where Chris Hemsworth was in this fat suit, and it was kind of done in a way where you kind of look at it and go, oh, look at him, he's let himself go. And all of this kind of weird stuff. That's where it kind of really sits funky with me. And I feel like I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, because obviously people who listen to this podcast probably think very similarly to me, but I feel like actors in general need to sort of claim their morals a little bit. And if you think that there should be a space for bigger performers to be seen on screen, then stop accepting those roles. Don't just accept it because it's quite selfish in a way to be like, I'm going to accept this because I want to have that moment of transformation. Cool. So does everybody else.
Yeah.
Like, maybe we just kind of put our own selfish needs to one side for 2 seconds and allow other people in the space. And do you know what, there's probably if you're a thin actor, you'll say no, they'll go to the next thin actor, they might say yes, but at least you know that you've stuck with what you want to, your own morals. We have actors in general in this industry, I think we feel very powerless because our jobs are reliant on other people. They're reliant on other people casting us. Like, we have quite a little control over whether we're in something or not. And so there is this kind of act of like, I've got to take all these jobs because I've got to prove that I'm good enough. And if I do this job and I transform into a completely different person, people will think I'm a better actor, because that's a whole other thing as well. If people gain weight for a film like Bridget Jones, you mentioned in one of your podcasts, it's, everyone's like, oh my god, how dedicated is
to the craft.
She's so dedicated to the craft. And it's the same thing happens when people lose loads of weight. I'm of the argument that you should never put your body in turmoil for a job,
for a role.
It's a lot, but there is this kind of expectation, I think, that people just kind of want to grab every possible opportunity. But I think sometimes we do need to take a step back from ourselves and realize that maybe that opportunity would be better placed in someone else's hands.
I really appreciate your insight into the costume point of view. That's something I just don't have sight of, so I really appreciate you bringing that into the pod. But there's something actually, because we did Elvis a few weeks back now, the Baz Luhrmann biopic, and in that famously Tom Hanks is wearing an awful fat suit. Jesus Christ, Tom. But interestingly, so does Austin Butler towards the end of the film. And when you were kind of explaining away Emma Thompson's use of the fat suit in Matilda, I was explaining away Austin Butler's use, because I don't think it would have been right or ethical to have asked Austin Butler to gain weight to portray an older Elvis. I think that would have been morally wrong. So in this circumstance, like, I totally understand the use of a fat suit here, or the use of prosthetics here. Yeah. But then with Tom Hanks. Oh, Tom Cruise did wear a fat suit in Tropic Thunder, so damn the Toms.
It's there.
He's there. He's gonna have to come off at some point. With Tom Hanks, he's in this fat suit, and it's just terrible. And I was struck with this idea, and maybe you can add a bit more nuance to this conversation, with why do studios feel the need to go for fat suits? Like, so my point was, Elvis couldn't have been made without Tom Hanks signing on, because it was in development hell for a very long time. I think it'd been written in 2014, and it wasn't until 2020, when Tom Hanks signed on, did they finally get the ball rolling. So they kind of needed Tom Hanks in the film, and he's decided to play Colonel Tom Parker, who was a larger man. So they put him in the fat suit. So they want to get that like A-list name recognition, maybe to get butts on seats when it comes to the cinema. But so there you have a problem where you've not got, like, you might not have like an equivalent A-list fat actor who could have taken on that role and got the same response. So there's one issue. Do we have fat actors coming through the kind of drama school pipeline to be cast in those films? Like, I guess my question is, do they exist? Do they get casted? And then if they're not getting casted, then it leads to a problem further down when they do want to portray fat characters, but then they're like, oh, well, we'll just have to use thin actors. Have I explained myself well?
Yeah, no, it is like a vicious cycle.
Yeah, I couldn't work out, like, it's a chicken and egg situation, right?
You don't know, and this is the thing with the industry as a whole. There's loads of different elements of the industry that need to change, and it is this kind of vicious cycle, because drama schools, they kind of will, the actors that they take on to train, they'll take them based on whether they think they'll work, right? Because what's the point of training someone if you don't think they're going to work? Like, so obviously it's talent. You need to be able to act in order to get into a drama school. I don't think I know anybody who's been to a drama school who does not have talent. Like,
sure, that's
very rare to see. But it is also this idea that, you know, you want people who are going to be successful and get jobs, because ultimately it kind of looks bad on the drama school if you've got a bunch of people that leave and they don't get any work. Like, it won't look good, right? So yeah. I see plenty of, you know, fat actors going onto into drama schools. Not as many, let's not get it twisted, not as many as you would see normal sort of like straight sized actors, but it's you do see them. They are being trained, and they're coming out and they're doing some cool work. And in terms of, like, I see people in musicals and stuff, but it's like very particular parts. And you are right in saying, like, in terms of A-listers, a lot of them come up through the comedy route, which is just a stereotypical thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So a lot of them come up through the comedy route. Like, the person I think of right now who's like probably A-lister plus size actor is Melissa McCarthy.
Absolutely.
Who's phenomenal actor.
No, she's like, fantastic.
Incredible, came up through the comedy route, amazing at comedy, but amazing at everything else, and has really been able to show that in the last few years, because she came up through the comedy route, and people, she became like a household name. Another one that's sort of slowly starting to come up is Beanie Feldstein. Booksmart, things like that. She's really started to sort of gain popularity, and something I read recently from her was that she was being very cautious to not take any roles that were about her weight, because she didn't want to put that out into the world, which I thought was really amazing. Yeah. But it is a case of, with anything, and this is with anything in the industry, any diversity issue in the industry, it's because there's this vicious cycle of them having the same types of people come up the ranks, that when they do eventually want to tell those stories, they're scrambling. They're scrambling to find people, and they will find people. They will always find people. And if they don't, you know, in terms of this, you know, fat actors, they will put someone in a fat suit because it's kind of the easiest thing to do, right?
Yes.
Because if you want Tom Hanks in your film, he's going to get bums on seats, as you said, put him in a fat suit.
Put him in the fat suit.
Most people, and you know what, most people won't be bothered because they're probably going to sit there and go, oh, look at him, he looks so different, it was so crazy, I didn't even recognize him, he didn't even look like himself. And so they're not really going to care. And that's the kind of the big issue here, right? Because people don't really give a shit.
People aren't challenging it. People aren't. And this is the thing. This is why this podcast exists, because I've been thinking about this for years and I did a few articles on it and got good response. And I was like, hold on, like people actually agree with me. Let's start talking about it. And like the response has been awesome because, but again, it's one of those things where like, unless someone calls it out, people don't think about it. Again, it's like, I'd love to be in that kind of privileged state where I didn't have to think about how my body is perceived in real life and in media. But unfortunately, I do need to think about it because it does have serious ramifications. But
that's the thing that people don't realize. Sorry to cut you off. That's the thing that people don't realize is that it impacts the way that you view people outside of yourself, right?
Yeah.
So when you watch a film, you read books, you watch TV shows, you go to see plays, people just see it as like mindless entertainment, right? But it's not mindless, because when you sit there and you take things in, you start to view people in very specific ways based on what you see on screen, despite the fact that when I walked down the street, I was walking through a train station the other day, and I randomly thought, because I was thinking about being on this podcast, I was thinking about what I was going to say, and I was walking through and I was like, it would be so lovely if I could watch a film, TV show where everyone kind of looked like this. And what I meant by that was that everyone looked different, and it was kind of, and everyone's just going about their business. And I was just sort of looking at people because I'm a bit of a people watcher, and I was just kind of watching people and just being like, wow, like everyone just looks different in their own normal, amazing way. And it would be so nice to see that. And we do see it sometimes on screen, and I find it really refreshing. I've just finished watching the first season of The Bear, which you can watch on Disney Plus. That's got people, and I was looking at, I was like, this cast looks so lacking a better word, so normal.
Yeah,
they don't look super Hollywood. I thought it when I watched the film Nomadland. And they were all normal people. Most of them weren't actors. They just were people that actually lived on the road. And you kind of watch it and you just go, oh, that Hollywood gleam that exists over things, I think sometimes can be detrimental to the story slightly. But it also just, as you said, it impacts the way people view other people. Because if you watch a film like Mean Girls and someone, you know, bring it back to Mean Girls, if you watch a film like Mean Girls and you see someone's, as we were saying, her status get lowered because she gets bigger, and by bigger I mean like a minuscule amount, she has some padding on her bum, which you know most people would love to have right now. You know, her status gets lowered for that. You start to think that basically if you're a bigger person, your status is lowered, right? It's just the way. And so that impacts, that's why I honestly believe that is why people talk to fat people in such a disgusting way, because they're so used to people on screen being spoken to that way if they're bigger, that they almost feel like they have permission.
100%. Like I have received at school 100% comments about my weight, and then in real life, now I'm in my 30s, I'm an adult walking around my life, I get heckled at this. And it's because it is so normalized in cinema, in TV, and even like the smallest of representations. So interestingly, we've actually only spoken mainly about the straight size cast. There are bigger people in this film, but they are at the background, where they always are, right? They're not the main characters of the story. But when literally we're 2 minutes into this film and Katie goes to her first day of class, she goes to sit down, and you see like Damien and Janice be like, oh, not there, not there. And she goes to sit behind a larger boy, and they go, oh, don't sit there, he farts a lot. And he looks around with these little sad puppy dog eyes. And I'm like, we are 2 minutes in and we have reinforced.
I wrote this down as well.
Yeah. We have reinforced the stereotype that fat people burp and fart and smell and are gross and don't know like basic human decency. I don't know how many times this specific trope has come up in this pod, from Shrek to Bridesmaids. It is everywhere. And I was so disappointed to see it. I was so disappointed. I was like, no, Lee, don't do that.
It literally is like 2 minutes into the film as well.
Yeah.
And I literally was like, oh, the farts a lot guy is plus size. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so like frustrating to see because it, like you said, it just reinforces these stereotypes. And I just sit there and I just roll my eyes because I'm just like, blah, like, why are we doing this? Like, again, you know?
Yeah, like who does this benefit, you know? And this is I mean, I'm going to say something quite harsh, but I really get frustrated with fat representation in cinema like this because it makes us look inhuman. It makes us look like we're not part of the same club as the straight size people. Like, this guy just farts a lot. We don't do that, straight size people. And then 5 minutes later, we get the walk through the canteen with all the different cliques. Now, I loved this scene when I was younger. I thought it was so cool. I don't know, there's something that so interesting about seeing these like different groups of people that you can kind of semi-relate to. So you've got the jocks, you've got say the nerdy Asians, and then the cool Asians. I mean, that's probably very problematic. And then you've got the let me just get this. I know I wrote it down. The girls who eat their feelings. Yes. So you have a group, a table full of bigger girls, and one of them is got like a sandwich and adding more food to the sandwich. But you know what I saw? She was smiling, Jess. She is smiling. She's going do do do, and then like
enjoying her sandwich
as she should. So I was like, I know you're meant to be like, look at this one. She doesn't know when to stop eating. But I was like, she is happy. Let her be happy. And then literally, then we get to the girls who eat nothing, and you have a group of six girls, young women. And they are all very slender. They all have a straw going into one Diet Coke can. So it's like, which one is it?
Laugh, but Jesus.
Which one is it?
And this is the other thing. It's vilifying food, right? It's off the bat. It's vilifying food. So you've got someone who's she's packing a sandwich full of crisps or whatever it is that she's putting in there, and she's having a great time, really loving her food. And you're meant to look at that because they go, girls who eat their feelings, and you're meant to go, oh, well, you shouldn't be eating all of that. And it's one of those things where it vilifies the food, and then that carries on later on in the film when she's like there with the package reading, is butter a carb, what percentage of fat is this, and like trying to figure out all of the nutritional elements of this chocolate bar that she's trying to eat, which then ends with her going, whatever, I'm going to go get cheese fries.
So
and
good.
It's like, and it's one of those things where there's sort of like this constant sort of vilifying of food, which we all know is not a good path to head down, especially for young women, because you know they fall down the eating disorder route, and that's what it was kind of representing with the girls who don't eat anything. Just definitely. One Diet Coke, and again, I think that part of this film is designed to sort of satirize that, and you're kind of supposed to watch it and be like, oh, this is so silly. But again, because the majority of the people who watch this would have been and will still be teen girls, I just think that kind of jokey element falls on deaf ears, because it's just like, well, oh yeah, they eat their feelings, and I would never have a sandwich with crisps in it.
Well, but what's interesting, right, is the film has said to the audience, one of the reasons why Regina is, well, all the plastics are as successful in Girl World as much as they. That's a real like tongue twister for me, Girl World, because I roll my R's. One of the reasons why they're so successful is because they are slender. So the film has stipulated that to be a fact, but then has mocked a group of 6 young women for being too slender. Right?
Yeah, you can't win.
You cannot win. And I hear what you're saying. Yes, okay, this is not saying like either is good. You know, it is meant to be like, oh, it's a silly joke. And then because you got Janice ending with the table where the greatest people you'll ever meet, and that's where she and Damien sit at lunch. But unfortunately, when I was 12 years old, when I would have first watched this, I would not have caught any of that nuance. And the fact that this film is still so successful, with younger generations coming through, with the musical. I haven't seen the musical. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it. I've listened to okay, so I have seen it, but like on a bootleg. Never do that, people.
Never do that. Pay your artists.
Naughty. But it's never come to the UK, and I just wanted to have a little look at some of the clips. No, it's supposed to, but for some reason it hasn't come over. Anyway, so I've seen little clips of it that people have posted online, and I've listened to the soundtrack. There's a line in it, and the reason why I mentioned it to you in our emails, so I kind of want to talk about this. There was a line in one of the songs. The song's called Meet the Plastics, and it's introducing all of the plastics, says doing what it says on the tin. And when Regina's doing her verse, introducing herself, one of her lines is and I never weigh more than 115. So she's saying off the bat, I never weigh more than 115, and which is very thin. And you sort of like roll your eyes, like it's ridiculous. And it's kind of one of those things where, the musical it came out a few years ago, but you kind of would have hoped that maybe they would have thought about what they were doing. And there's when she has the scene, I've only seen little clips of it, but when she has the scene where she's wearing sweatpants and they say you can't sit with us, she's got this like ridiculous padding, and it's on stage, so everything is a bit more like dramatic,
the back row,
because it's on stage for the back row. You've got to perform for the back row. But it's like ridiculous padding on just her bum, and it's just so stupid and annoying. But there was a interview so the role of Regina George was originally on Broadway played by an actress called Taylor Louderman, and then it was the role was taken over by Renee Rapp, who is due to play Regina in the film adaptation of the musical. Renee's gone on to do she did Sex Lives with College Girls with HBO. She's released some of her own music. She's absolutely phenomenal. Honestly, I would highly recommend you go listen to some of her songs, like Voice of an Angel. She had an interview where she was talking to someone and they mentioned this line, I never weigh more than 115. And she said that she had conversations with the team and was like, I don't weigh 115 and I never will weigh 115. I'm a tall girl. Like, it's not going to happen. And they were like, oh yeah, we don't want you to gain any, to lose any weight. Like, that's not a thing that we need to happen, which I was like, great. Because this Renee, when she did it, was like fresh out of high school, 18 years old, like really young. And it's like, so great that they were like, they weren't saying to her lose weight or any of this stuff because she was really young. And good that she had the agency to say, I'm not going to do that.
Massively, yeah.
But it made me think, why do you even have that line in the first place?
Then why have it? That's it. And that for me also reads as like they don't understand the connotations of saying that line night after night. Again, like Broadway is for every age. Obviously I know they're like age specific shows, but like, kids could go to that. And like, that's what I'm saying. Like they lack they lack the like the worldly awareness that we now have to go like, oh, that is such a toxic line, and it's meant to be seen as toxic. But when you actually have like that being reinforced, like, oh yeah, she's only going to weigh 115, it really reminds me of have you seen The American Office?
No, I haven't.
No, it's funny. I asked this question quite a lot because I reference The Office so much. So many people haven't seen it, and it actually shocks me because I think it's like one of the massive, big shows. But clearly, I'm just in my own little echo chamber. But there's a episode toward in the last season where Pam, who is one of the main characters, like she was pregnant in the previous season, like, and the actress was genuinely pregnant. Jenna Fisher, who is actually going to be in the Mean Girls musical adaptation in 2024, so there's a weird little quinky dink. And she was pregnant, and she was, pregnant body, she was quite big. That's what happens when you grow a baby. And so they make that is written into the show where people comment on how big she is. And I'm just saying, like, she has said she didn't find it personal. I would take it personally. Like, how fucking rude. Like, I've grown a child. I'm growing a child, and you're making a punchline.
Yeah, leave me be.
Yeah. But then, so in the final season where she has, I guess, lost the baby weight, and I really appreciate that's a toxic thing to say, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. And there's a point where like basically she has to weigh similar to something. And there's this real, like, she turns to the camera, she goes, well, if you weigh 120 pounds, as if to be like, haha, I've lost all this weight and now I'm super slender. And I was just like, that is such an odd, it's a flex, right? It's a flex. Like, I only weigh this amount. I'm like, okay. And you mentioned it earlier where, you know, the fact that we talk so much about actors and actresses gaining weight, losing weight, you know, commitment to the craft, right? And I think the other issue with that is that the studios or the channels, whoever it is, they also use it as part of their publicity. So I have recorded, we haven't yet released an episode on just kind of the Marvel universe and its influence onto the beauty standard, especially the male beauty standard. But they will use their actors who are going through intense fitness regimes to become superhuman, superhero fit, as part of the publicity marketing machine of that of the film. It's all intertwined. We did Hot Fuzz, literally got dropped today, but there's a trivia which says Simon Pegg lost 2 stone for this role. Like, it's intertwined. And I think the thing is, we as a population, as a society, have been told repeatedly by the media that we should care about other people's bodies. So when we have Mean Girls coming through, also reinforcing the fact that it's a social currency. We've got, you know, 2018 musicals being released, and then we've got 2024 film adaptations of it. Are they going to include those lines? Are they going to include lines about, like, you know, the girls who eat their feelings or the girls who eat nothing at all? Like, have we evolved? Or do we just think, oh, it's funny to like joke about food and weight and, you know, reinforce that our weight or our bodies are a direct correlation to how we should be treated in society? And again, I think media has a really interesting line where it wants to represent a version of reality. You know, so here you've got Tina Fey satirizing diet culture, sure, but she's also still representing it. So she could have made a choice to say something different, but she didn't, because she wants to show like, oh, but this does happen. I'm like, yeah, sure, but you're representing it and also reinforcing it. You're not challenging it and providing a alternative option.
It's one of those things where it happens a lot with any kind of underrepresented group, is they kind of get put in this box of like, well, this actually happens, right? So like,
yes,
fat people have struggles with their weight. Like, most fat people have gone through that, right? When you're in school, you have that experience of like, oh, I don't like my body and all this and that, and so they represent that on screen, but then they never give them the opportunity to show the other parts of just normal life. It's nothing to do with your body, not like literally nothing to do with your body. And they don't show that, so you're only represented as one particular thing, and that's when people think you are only that one particular thing, and that's when you start to think of yourself as that one particular thing. And I think it's dangerous when they add a specific number to things, like with the 115 line and with the 120 pounds whatever line. It's like it becomes like this thing where people go, well, maybe I need to be that way, and they have a specific number that they have to reach. And I feel like with every underrepresented group, they all want the same thing, which is to just be able to be seen, to go to a cinema and not see their trauma on screen.
Oh my god, love, please. Yeah. And on that, like, I love the show Shrill, right? I love the show Shrill. It was a really good representation of you know, the fat female experience, totally. But it was also like watching some trauma, you know. There are some good and bad. Like, I do really like Shrill. I'm not trying to knock it, but like, to your point, it's really hard to find a media where like they just happen to be in a bigger body. You know, it doesn't make them stronger or more confident or even more shy or more reserved. Like, they are just their personality. Their body is like the most least interesting thing about them. And that's the other thing, right? Like, you know, you mentioned there, like, oh, they struggle with their weight, and it becomes part of their like personality, you know. And you're like, well, does it? And then I think then I fall into that trap, because then I have now built a platform where I do plus size fashion on my socials, and then I've got this podcast where I talk about, you know, fat representation in film. Have I made it a part of my personality? Have I fallen into that trap? Like, is this like a self-fulfilling prophecy?
Yeah, it's really difficult, because if people don't speak about it, then nothing changes, but then you kind of fall into a trap of becoming like labeled as a particular thing. And it's like, I think I saw, was it Nicola Coughlan, I think I'm pronouncing her name correctly, from Derry Girls and Bridgerton. I think I saw an interview with her once, and it was a really interesting interview, where she was talking about how people called her like the fat one in Derry Girls, and she was like literally a size 10, and she was just like great. But she was saying that someone was talking to her about like being, you know, representing fat women and all of this, and she said that just because she exists in this body doesn't mean she's a representation for people, right? Because I think that sometimes people they I feel like a person who's kind of fallen into this is Lizzo. Amazing, fabulous, and really like pushing and, you know, pushing back on all of those opinions that people have about fat people being lazy and unfit, because I mean, who could do a show like her if you're unfit? Come on now. But there was a time where she did a juice cleanse.
Yes, I remember that.
She was open about it after the fact and was like, I did this because I've been drinking a lot and I feel like shit, and I just needed a little like whoosh, a little rush out. But when you become the face of fat people, I feel like people almost feel betrayed when you go in another direction.
Oh, that's so nuanced.
Do you know what I mean? It's really difficult, and this is where any kind of and this is where the media is at fault, because you put people into boxes, and this is eventually what happens, right?
Yes.
If you didn't put people into boxes, then we wouldn't have this issue. It's like when Rebel Wilson lost loads of weight, and everyone felt betrayed by that because she'd lost all this weight, and then she released a clothing line that didn't go above a size 16, and it was like, well, you've experienced this, and why aren't you? And it becomes really difficult because people just want to live and they want to do what they want to do with their bodies or whatever, and it becomes difficult for us as viewers to be able to distinguish them as the creative, them as the person against this idea that we've been sort of, it's kind of been ingrained in our heads from a very young age, that people are particular things based on what they look like.
Yes, absolutely. And then you've got films like Mean Girls reinforcing that. You know, they are literally showing plus size people farting. You've got plus size people stacking their sandwiches high. There's like lines in this film, just literally throwaway lines, where when they're looking through the burn book and they say Caitlin Costin is a fat whore. Like, we don't even know who that Caitlin Costin is, but she's a fat whore apparently. You've got the when they have to do, I do love this scene. It's so fucking ridiculous when Miss Norbury says they have to write down a confession and then they have to fall into the pile of girls like a trust fall. And you've got the character, I think something Lopez her last name is, but she's in the wheelchair and she says, Laura, I don't hate you because you're fat because I hate you. And I literally heard that line this time. Yeah, I literally heard this line this time and I was like, what does that even mean? What, like, is it, did you just want to say that this character was fat? Like, it was just
so weird.
It's such a weird thing. I truly don't actually know what it means, but I was really taken aback by that.
Something I did want to say though was that despite all of these stereotypes that are mostly forced on the women, you know, Damien's a plus size character, but his weight is not mentioned once.
Nope. And
I really tried to look out for it, and it was not mentioned once.
No one comments on it. It's it is odd. I don't know whether like that changes in the musical at all, or whether we'll see it in the new film coming out. I hope not. Oh my God, I hope not. But it is interesting. But I think part of it is because this is girl world. You know, we don't see much of the high school boy world. We see, like, you know, the flickers we get is with that Gretchen's like on again, off again boyfriend, you know, being really like sexually perverse. You've got obviously Aaron Samuels, you've got the guy that Regina ends up going out with at the end, Shane Ullman. You know, we don't really see much of that, and that's cool. Like, this was like, I guess it wouldn't pass a reverse Bechdel test, and I'm absolutely fine with that. What was my point going to be? I have
so that might be why we don't hear anything about
Damien's way. It's possible we might, you know, that is happening in the background, but it's just not at the forefront of this film, which, I mean, it could be, but you know, there's a lot going on. Maybe there is a film, there's another version of this film from Damien's perspective, and we see a bit more about how he's treated by the other men. Obviously being gay as well. I wonder like how that would go down. I hope incredibly well. I really, really do. There was something else I wanted to say as we were talking about. Oh, that's it. There's a scene where Katie first goes to Regina's house and we meet Amy Poehler's phenomenal cool mom. What an absolute icon. And then we go into Regina's awesome bedroom. Like, imagine you had that bedroom when you were like 16 years old. Oh, it's just brilliant. And the three girls, the three plastics, stand in front of the mirror and they all just body shame themselves. So Karen says that she has huge hips. Gretchen says she hates her calves, and Regina says that she has man shoulders. And then they all turn to Katie to like join in this like body shaming thing. Now I get the joke, I totally hear it, but isn't it so sad? Isn't it so sad? And I really wish I remembered who actually said this. I think I've seen it somewhere to like properly attribute to it, but they say that some of the strongest bonding between women is around body shaming, weight loss, and diet culture, and especially with mothers and daughters. And I find like obviously this film is reinforcing that. We see that in other films. I am completely blank on different examples here. But like even like The Devil Wears Prada, you know, there's a whole thing there where like Anne Hathaway is like not trying to lose weight, but she does lose weight because of the pressure of being in the fashion industry. You've got Bridget Jones's Diary, which is constantly like trying to lose weight, and her friends kind of reinforce that. You've got what am I trying to think of like TV shows wise? Have you got any examples where you've got like women bonding over weight loss or body shaming?
Body shaming.
I did put you on the spot.
There's bound to be
There's
other like
bound to be
teen-based shows that I'm just blanking. Oh, Pretty Little Liars.
Oh, was in there.
They had a character called Hannah in that, one of the lead characters played by Ashley Benson, and her past self, she was called Fat Hannah.
Oh, now,
God. Please bear in mind that she was like not fat at all. Anyway,
sure.
As is always the case. And she loses weight because her best friend, who's like an absolute bitch, keeps calling her this. And then Pretty Little Lies is a whole like mystery show, and there's like people texting her saying, "Oh, you're gonna gain all the weight again," and all of this stuff. Is very it's very strange. But she kind of her social status rises because she loses the weight, but she bonds with this other girl called Mona in that show, and Mona was very uncool and was kind of geeky, and then both of them became very like hot is the best way to describe it, like your stereotypical hot girls, and so they bonded over that. You should probably do an episode on Pretty Little Lies just for that.
I mean, I've never seen it. I will have to get a guest who is well versed in Pretty Little Liars, and I can just ask questions. I have no idea what you're talking about, but it sounds toxic as fuck.
You just have to watch one season because it's too long to watch the whole thing. But like, there's a lot of that in there that's very typical of that teen drama. And I mean, we see it in like just people changing the way they look. We see it in Saint Trinian's, one of my favorite films of my teens.
Please
and they have the
go
makeover
on.
scene.
Yeah.
Now I love
the
me a
makeup
makeover scene.
I love it.
I love me a makeover scene. You give me a makeup, you seriously, if there is a montage in a film, I love it. I watched Creed the other day. There was a workout montage. I was like, yes, let's go. Love me a montage. And the little makeover montage is great, but it's quite funny that she goes from being this very sort of like awkward girl who's nobody really likes, and then they do this big makeover and she looks incredible. Her hair looks beautiful, her makeup looks amazing, and then suddenly everyone's like in love with her and it's like, oh my god, she's person who's going to lead us forward in this thing. And it's quite an interesting thing that happens a lot in there's a makeover scene in Wild Child. There's a bit of a makeover moment in Angus Thongs and Perfect Snogging. There's like these moments that seem to happen quite often in teen based films, TV shows, where people have this big makeover, and it's lovely to watch because, like we said, we love a makeover scene. It's also one of those things where you're like, and we're putting people's appearance above all else. I think my friend, when I did my episode on my podcast about body image, my friend Zoe, who's so much more eloquent than I am, was like, she said something along the lines of how women's appearance is viewed as a commodity for men, and how it's one of those things where you will see things, and although even if it is designed for women, there'll still be that element to it, because these people have to be attractive to men in order to be marketable. And it's because the people who run this industry are men.
You said it. You literally said it. I literally couldn't agree more with your friend Zoe. Like, that's literally the whole thing is through the male gaze. Even when films are targeted at women, they're through the male gaze. Now, Mean Girls is a really good example of that. It is through the male gaze. Like, think about the shot of her, like the arse like stuffed into the sweatpants. You've got, I mean, I know I love this shot because they just look so cool, but are you telling me they're not also meant to be sexy when the four of them are walking down the hallway to Missy Elliott's Pass the Dutch? Like, they are these are like meant to be like 17-year-old girls. They're meant to be like juniors in high school, which I think is around 16, 17. I don't understand the American school system. I've watched I've watched so much of their media. I have no idea how it works.
They don't leave school till they're 18, and that's when they're a senior, and junior is underneath that, so there you go. 16.
Yeah, because Aaron's meant to be the senior, so he's the year older, and they can drive a car, so it must be at least 16. So anyway, they're walking down the hall, and they are like, you know, mini skirts, heels, like that. You're telling me that is not appealing to the male gaze? Now, don't get me wrong, I think they look great. This is the problem I actually have of Mean Girls, where is, even though you're not meant to be on the side of the plastics, because we are told as young girls and women that we should be presentable, we should be beautiful, appeal to men, because that's all we're about. That's all. We don't have any of our own thoughts. We must only appeal to the men. They come across as aspirational. They are in slender bodies, which this film has already established is social currency. Regina and Gretchen are incredibly wealthy, are from wealthy families. They have really nice cars, huge houses, Fendi purses. They've got the hot boyfriend. We all want Aaron Samuels. And they are wearing what would have been classed as really cool clothes in 2004. They are aspirational, even though they're meant to be the villains. And so when this film came out, I remember a lot of people wanted to call their clique the Plastics. I remember that specifically. But I think Tina Fey wants you to think the opposite. And I think it's that the adult brain who's created this film wants other adults, which we are now. We're like, oh yeah, we totally understand what Tina Fey is trying to say. But as a child consuming this media, I went, no. That looks really cool. And again, it's reinforcing the male gaze. It's reinforcing this idea, well, we should always be like sexy, appealing. We had mentioned St. Trinian's, and I was going through the makeover scene in my head, I thought the moment where she gets to like the Lush, the Chelsea girls, and it's like she's literally in lingerie, and she could have only have been maybe like the character maybe like 16 or 17, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like again, that is so dodgy.
Yeah, no,
Back on
it really is, it's so weird.
Yeah,
I don't like it.
I
And
don't
it was
like
the
it.
same when I was talking about like the girls in Pretty Little Liars, where they become these like sexy girls, and it's like, you're a teenager. It's really
Of
fucking weird.
course,
It's
it's
really
so
fucking
weird.
weird, and it happens all the time. And again, like you mentioned, like Tina Fey from an adult brain is trying to be like, show how ridiculous all of this is. And I think part of that will be the fact that it's based on a book that is a parenting book.
Yes,
It's designed to help parents deal with girls being involved in like their cliques and stuff, but like it's so it doesn't land when a teen girl's watching it, because like you said, you're going to watch that and go, oh, they look amazing, they have really cool clothes, I want to look like that, I want to dress older like that, because then I'll feel like this. And you say, you know, people wanted to call their groups the Plastics, which just proves that it didn't land in the way that it was supposed to, because ultimately this film is about not being that bitch, not being a bully, and how in the end there's this harmony, and they have those junior plastics walking down the thing, and they almost get hit by the bus. And it's so just good. Like this idea of like, no one's going to ruin what we've got going on now, because everybody's at peace, like peacetime in high school. And it's so it's weird that people sort of have gravitated, well, it's not weird, it's kind of, I'm not even surprised, but people gravitate towards these particular ideas, because we've been presented for so long with this idea that you have to be attractive, and when I say attractive, I mean like stereotypically attractive, and you have to fit into these particular molds in order to be, you know, have social currency and be able to like work your way up the ladder. And it's annoying that, you know, people talk about pretty privilege all the time, and how that's very much a common thread. And as someone like, if I'm going to talk about my own experience, please be vulnerable for a moment, as someone who, when I was at school, I was like sort of slightly bigger girl, and then I lost a bunch of weight throughout my time when I was between like the ages of like 17 all the way through until recently. I gained a lot of weight back, and it's so interesting how differently people treat you. It's it's a very weird thing, where I was kind of bullied a lot all the way up until I was in sixth form, and then I lost a bunch of weight and I wasn't bullied anymore. And I was like, and at first I thought, oh, it's probably because people have grown out of bullying. I don't necessarily think that was true. I think it was there was something, they didn't have something that was easy to sort of jab at, and then when I was, you know, going through my whole time training, I wasn't, my weight wasn't really there was a couple of mentions of it where it was like some little comments said about there'll be someone somewhere that out there who likes what you look like, which was lovely to lovely to hear from a lecturer.
Holy shit.
But you know, there were other people in my year group who had it far worse, who were literally told in front of people that they needed to lose weight. It's so strange how differently you're treated. And then I've gained a bit of weight recently, pandemic, what can you do? And just living your life. And then it's so weird how that impacts the way that people speak about certain things, how people kind of communicate, like, you know, with my acting career, and how it's kind of at the moment hit a bit of a standstill. And then there's people who I know, who I'm not gonna name drop because it's for me to bring up with them, but you know, have said, oh, maybe you need to lose weight and then you'll get more auditions and things like that. And it's really quite difficult to kind of be able to sit there and go and understand, because I've been through the spectrum of it and seen the two ends of it, and then that becomes difficult, because then you can't help but sit there and think, oh, maybe if I did lose weight then I'd be better off. But when I was a size 10, I thought I was fat.
Wow. this is the game.
And this is the thing. And I remember having a moment in the lockdown, because I wasn't seeing anyone. I was basically just seeing myself, where I genuinely looked in the mirror. I was a size 10 at this point. I looked in the mirror and I went, have you been telling yourself for 4 or 5 years? Like, are you okay? Sort your brain out. Because that's how therapy works, isn't it? Sort your brain out.
That's what you used to. That's what you need to do. Quick tap. We're good.
Quick tap and you're good to go. And yeah, so it's a very strange thing, and I know I've gone on and on about being an actor and everything, but this industry makes it really hard as well to be able to kind of disconnect yourself from those things, because as we just said, the media likes to present people in very specific boxes.
Yes.
And as an actor, you just want to do everything. Like, my dream career, if I just laid it all out, would be I get to play all different types of roles. And the big frustrating thing about it is that, like, and may sound a bit narcissistic, but I know I'm a good actor. I don't need anyone to tell me that. But then you sort of have these things where it's like, my physical appearance is what's preventing me from getting certain jobs, and that's really frustrating. That's why loads of actors have eating disorders. That's why
I bet
people go down these rabbit holes of being obsessed with what they look like and feeling like once they've lost the weight they can't gain it back, and that's a feeling that a lot of women have, and it's just sort of exasperated. So it becomes really difficult in this industry to be able to just disconnect yourself from that and just be able to look at yourself as a person, right?
Or just a talent.
So it becomes it's just difficult. It's a difficult thing that all women face, where they're kind of put in these boxes because of the media and because of how we're presented in diet culture and all of this awful shit that's thrown on us, and we're just kind of made to feel like the only thing that we have going for us is what we look like.
That's all it's boiled down to, right? I really, really appreciate like your vulnerability there and opening up. With this, unfortunately, I feel like we can't get away from the kind of our own experiences of this. It's insidious how much diet culture has infected our brains, our society, how we judge people, how we view people, how the acting industry then works, like how then it's represented on media. Like, it's everywhere. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? And again, when you mentioned there, when you were a size 10 and you thought you were bigger because that's what they want you to think, so you do the next diet and then that won't work because it's like harder for you to lose weight, because you're probably maybe at your lowest possible weight for your body, for your metabolism, so you couldn't lose weight, but you keep trying and you go to the gym hard, and it's insidious. And like I don't think I've spoken about it on this podcast, but where we have now a new trend of specific drugs that people are taking to lose even more weight. And there are studies coming out that say as soon as you come off that drug, the weight will come back. And we're not talking about the long-term effects, because the diet industry and the media reinforces this, make it out that the only thing that matters is now. It's how you look now. Forget about tomorrow. Forget about a year from now. All that matters is now. And then quick fixes. And once that drug stops working or whatever might happen, or, there's a national shortage because that's going to happen, they'll come back and go like, oh, well, there's surgery. And you can never do enough. That's how this works. You can never do enough. And the biggest fuck you we can stand against the diet industry and the billions of dollars it's making is by saying, you know what, I'm actually really content in the body I have. You only get one of these. And so, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm a year out of an eating disorder, which I had for 20 years. And throughout that recovery, I found a lot of love for myself. When I first started my therapy, I mean, I would say, and I apologize if I trigger anyone, but I would say I would hate my body. I hated my body. I hated it. And I remember my therapist saying like, okay, can we start at the very beginning and be like, can you not just be thankful that it's a vessel for you to live your life? Because if you didn't have this body, you could not live. And I was like, oh my God, well, that's just such a that's such a woo-woo way of looking at it. But genuinely, that really did help. And again, it's that rationalization of going, oh, this isn't just some kind of disconnected appendage. This is me. This is physically me. Why am I so angry at it? And but then the problem is, like, the reason why I was so angry at it and the reason why I hated it so much is because everyone around me, the media included, Mean Girls included, was telling me I should hate it. So like it's the biggest fuck you to be content in the body you have. But I can only appreciate that, as someone who, your craft is also to do with how you look. I know it shouldn't be, but obviously it is right now. And we live in hope that will change, but that must be so difficult to navigate and to constantly have to reinforce your own confidence that no, I'm good. I'm not the issue, it's the industry that's the issue. But then you're like, but I want to get paid. I want to work. Like, I can't imagine that.
It's really difficult. I mean, I always just think, like, when I was my smallest, when I was size 10, I got an audition once for overweight teenager. And I was like, and at that point I was like, I literally don't know what else I can do for you here, because if I'm a size 10 and I'm going in, and I mean, I won't say what the film's called, but I have seen that the film has come out, and it does seem that they actually did end up casting like an actual plus size actor. Maybe when all these people were brought in, because I turned up to the audition room and everyone was my size, but all like size 10 and below, and I was like, what's going on here? Like, this is a very bizarre thing to do. So I feel like maybe the casting team just kind of got it wrong, or whatever it might have been, but they seem to have actually gone down the proper route. But it was one of those things where I was just like, one of my second ever professional audition, I walked in the room, it was for a cruise ship to be a singer, and I was like, I'm not really about the cruise ship life, but I need to go to some auditions. And I walked in, and the woman looked me up and down and she sighed. Just went, okay, I guess I'm not getting this.
Excuse me?
Yeah, she sighed. She did a big like,
oh my god,
and what's your name? And I was like, I haven't even said my name yet. I hadn't even been able to say hi, like, honestly. And I was like, okay. But it was kind of like I don't want to say it was like a blessing, because it sounds really stupid, but a blessing in disguise, because it made me realize very early on that it wasn't necessarily all about your talent, because I think a lot of people get sucked into this idea that they're not talented enough. And I don't ever really think that's the case. I think it is sort of, a lot of the time it's about what you look like, and it is difficult to kind of disconnect that like career stuff from just being yourself. A quote I heard once that I always go back to whenever I'm thinking like that is that you can never be happy in a body that you view as temporary. And
there we go. I love that.
I think I just try and remind myself of that every so often when I'm feeling if I'm feeling a bit low. But it is hard. Like, there's no getting around it, and that's why I want to talk about it, because I don't think enough actors do. And I think it's worth people saying, I've been made to feel like shit, and we shouldn't be doing that.
No, 100%. I mean, you said it earlier, like, it's one of those things where people don't realize it's an issue because no one's talking about it, so you have to talk about it to get people thinking about it. And like, representation genuinely seriously matters in ways that I think a lot of people don't realize, because they are in privileged bodies, or they're privileged sexual identities, or privileged races. They don't see how important it is to see yourself in a positive light, right? And I think with you and talking about the acting process as well, like, unless people call it out, you mentioned, actors should maybe check their own privileges and morals and be like, should I really be taking this role, or could this go to someone else? And maybe, you're right, the next person might take it, but we need to make some kind of stand, and we need allies in that. And I think, the guests coming on this podcast are allies. I've had a few people who want to be on the pod, and they've questioned whether they are allowed to, because they wouldn't class themselves as plus size or fat or curvy, whatever word you want to use. And I have said, oh my God, like, I appreciate the self-awareness. I really, truly do. However, we need everyone talking about this. Everyone needs to be talking about this. So again, if any listeners who love going on podcasts and love chatting shit, and you were a bit nervous about should I add my voice into the ring? Yes, 100% please add your voice into the ring. We need more voices. So Jess, we've spoken for a little bit. We've actually spoken a little bit about Mean Girls and a lot about everything else. But is there anything specifically about Mean Girls that you wanted to call out that we haven't yet covered?
The first thing I want to say was that I'm really interested as to what the musical film is going to be like, and how they're going to interpret this piece for a modern audience. I say modern as if it came out 5 million years ago, but you know what I mean.
It's Shakespeare.
It's Shakespeare. So I'm interested in that. We'll have to come back and do a little rehash of it.
Oh my god,
when it comes out. So I'm interested in that. And the other thing I was just thinking about is going back to your thoughts at the beginning, where you were saying like people like Janice and all of that, saying that they're mean girls and they know that they're mean and all of this. I find it quite interesting because I've heard that line so many times, like, I know I'm a bitch. And I just find it really odd that girls, they seem to have been putting this, they put Janice on a pedestal and they put Regina on this pedestal of being like very self-aware, but it's like, just don't be a bitch.
yeah Well, interestingly on that, Miss Norbury has a really good line where she goes like, if you call each other, you got to stop calling each other sluts and whores, because it only makes okay for guys to call you sluts and whores. And it's like, you're meant to be like, oh god, I really hope people aren't like, oh, this is too woo-woo now, but like genuinely, like, it's hard enough being a woman or a femme presenting person. Have each other's backs. Like, I mean, again, it's like typical glass ceiling stuff. You know, just because you know one woman has made it to the top doesn't mean we then have equality. Just because we have one fat actress at the top of the chain in Melissa McCarthy doesn't mean we have fat equality. You know, we need to like be lifting other people up with us, and we need to have each other's backs. And so with Janice and Regina, like, yeah, they know they're mean girls, like they know they're bitches. And I'm like, yeah, okay, cool, grand. There's a difference between self-awareness and standing up for yourself, and then also causing the downfall for your fellow woman. Like, there's a massive difference. And like you mentioned earlier about how you have confidence in your talent, and you mentioned, oh, this might come across as narcissistic, and I really did want to jump in at that point, but you're on a roll and say it's not, you're just confident. And again, as women, we're constantly told, especially if you are a bigger person as well, you're constantly, you have to keep yourself small, don't toot your own horn, it looks like egotistical, narcissistic, what's like a word I'm trying to, she's up herself, all these kinds of phrases. I have been told on numerous occasions I am not, and I'm going to say it in the way they say it, you're not very humble, are you? No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm not humble. Why should I be? I know who I am. I know what I am. Next question. Why is humbleness on this pedestal? Fuck off. Like, I haven't got time for it. You shouldn't be humble. You should be saying how talented you are. Because surely, as an actress, you should be confident in your skill set. Like, it's so weird where we put how women should hold themselves, and then add in the intersectionality of race or gender identity or sexuality or body size. Oh, well, you should really, like, you know, not be too full of yourself because it comes across as really, I don't know, arrogant. Get over yourself. Truly.
And
like,
that's, you know, films like this reinforce that. It's that idea that they hate Regina because she's confident and she knows that she's, and obviously they hate her as well because she is mean, but she's also like very confident in who she is. She's very confident in her body, and like, and she knows she's pretty. She knows she's got a brain going on there. I mean, she uses it to do some bad things, but she doesn't get walked all over. There's the scene at the beginning where Gretchen's boyfriend or whatever is going on that date with another girl, and then she calls up Planned Parenthood or whatever it is, and it's like, it's awful, please never do that. She's also kind of a little bit clever, like, we can't deny, like, that's a smart move. So she's super got smart. Like slight, what was it that Janice calls her? Oh, she's an evil dictator.
No, my favorite my favorite Janice line is, she's a life ruiner. She ruins people's lives.
I quote that all the time. I'm like, life ruiner, ruins people's lives. I also literally quote Janice all the time. Like, she may be awful, but she does come up with some great ones. Yeah, she's evil. How do you take out an evil dictator? You block her resources. It's just like, there's just so many good quotes, but it is kind of, with Regina, it's like, and I mean, even with Janice, like, Janice is very confident with who she is. Like,
very confident.
She stands on the thing and she's like, I've got a big lesbian crush on you. Suck on that. And then it's like, she doesn't care.
Yeah. But I also hate her for that, because she throws Katie under the bus. And it's also, just on that, the fact she calls her Caddy when she wants to be called Katie. I'm like, who are you to tell her how she should be pronouncing her name? That's what I mean. Like, Janice is toxic. But yeah, the film frames it's like, yeah, but she knows she's toxic. That doesn't make it okay. That doesn't make it normalized. Like, come on.
Yeah, no. And I think this is a thing that a lot of young women go through, because I certainly went through it when I was in my sort of late teens, early 20s, where I kind of had this attitude of like, I'm gonna speak my mind and I'm not gonna give a shit. And then and now I look back and I kind of cringe a little bit, because like it doesn't take a lot to just be a nice person and be kind. And I think a lot of young girls do that because they think it's the way in which they can kind of prove themselves. It's that girl boss nature, isn't it? It's like girl boss, keep gaslight.
You're girl boss too close to the sun.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like, it's this idea of like, I'm not mean, I'm just honest.
Oh god, right? I used to say that all the time. And it's
gal.
the worst thing. It's the worst thing. I think back to it, I remember people be like, oh, that's really bitchy. I'm like, I'm not being a bitch, I'm just being honest. Shut up, Jess. No, you're not. When you think back, and obviously this is a good sign because it shows that I've grown as a person.
We grow, we evolve.
I look back and I just go, why did you ever say that? And then I see, I work in bars and restaurants and stuff, and I have for a long time working in hospitality. You get a lot of very young people, and I see people who are in their they're like 21, 20, 19, and they say stuff like that, and I'm like, you are going to get to 25 plus and you're going to go, oh yeah, why did I ever do that?
That second part of the brain kicks in. You're like, oh, I get it now. People hate
the brain
me.
develops and you go, people don't like me. I'm not very warm. I'm not a warm person.
I'm the issue. It's my fault. I remember I definitely, not necessarily to the same extent maybe that you did, but I definitely had that I would speak my mind thing. And I remember I got called out in hindsight completely fairly. And actually the person who called me out is a listener, and she will be listening, so I wonder if she remembers this. But basically some shit happened in the house and I was talking behind her back fully, like absolutely was doing it. I disagreed with her actions, and I just passed my test. I passed my test late, get over it. And we were driving, she was in the car with me, and she confronted me. She was like, I know you're talking about me. And I went, fuck yeah, I am. Like, I am. You're absolutely right. And then we actually had like a really open, honest conversation, and she was completely right. But look at that. Like, I think I was at the big bollocks being like, oh, I'm talking about her behind my back, but she had the bigger bollocks because she actually confronted me about it and like showed me to be the coward that I was, because I was 21, right? And I just remember thinking like, and I already liked her, and I was being a bitch, you're a mean girl, you're a bitch. I love how Lizzie Kaplan delivers that line. It's really, really well done. It's really like cutting. I
just have to cut this in. I've met Lizzie Kaplan once. I served her an espresso martini when I worked at a theatre.
And what was she like?
She said it was really lovely. It was a very brief little like, what do you want? She was like, can I get an espresso? And she came to see the show that was on, and it was and I saw her and I was like, oh my god, that's Janice from Mean Girls.
You recognize those eyes anywhere. She's got those massive doe eyes, and she's absolutely stunning. I am now googling her, but I think again maybe it's a rite of passage for a lot of girls, like that idea of like, I don't know, turning from meek mouse to overly confident mean girl bitch in the name of honesty. And then I guess kind of similar to the film Mean Girls, then you kind of realize, oh, what was all for? Like, why are we fighting against each other? We should be sharing the spring fling tiara. And I mean, as much as it is so cliche, I really do like the last scene. And I really actually like Katie, where she compliments Regina. You know, she fractured her spine, but she still looks like a rock star, which she absolutely does. She looks awesome with like the flowers in the thing. I think everyone looks great actually in that scene. Like, I think Janice's suit's awesome. I think Gretchen looks so cute. And I guess she calls out to, like, well, what I find really interesting, and actually be good to get your final thoughts on this, is she calls out the kind of bigger woman character, the fat woman character, as being really, you know, that hairdo must have spent hours, and then the woman in the wheelchair. And I thought it was very much a directed position of, like, these are women who would not be in the beauty standard, and I'm using air quotes, team, and they call them out to be like, they are also beautiful. Do you like that?
Yes, because I think it's a nice gesture. Obviously it would be nicer if we didn't have to have that kind of like pointed moment, because sometimes it can feel like a bit of a tick box situation, can't it, where it's like we're just sort of checking things off. But in terms of just looking at it for what it is, I think it is meant to be a very lovely little moment at the end, where it's like, look, we've all called each other out, like your friend did to you. We've all called each other out. We've come to realize that how we were behaving was wrong, and that actually we're all beautiful in our own way, and we're all fine. Like, we don't need to do any of this shit. And I think that based on just what it is, I think it's a really nice moment.
Yeah, I hear you. When I watched it this time around, I thought it could be misconstrued as contrived or condescending, but against the entire film, it does make sense. Like, again, if I try and put myself in Tina Fey's amazing shoes, I think that's what she was saying with that scene, and I appreciate that, where we've had this entire film with incredible amounts of diet culture and this idea of, you know, blonde perfection, slenderness, richness, fashion, coming in and going, actually the beauty standard is a whole load of shit, and actually everyone is beautiful. Like, Janice, for not conforming to gender norms, is beautiful. You've got the fat girl in the audience, she is beautiful. You've got Regina, who's got this big like neck brace thing on, she is beautiful. Like, I think that really is a moment which I if there is criticism, I understand, but it works for me, and it sounds like it works for you.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and there's always moments where it is kind of a bit like, oh, okay, it's a bit like, like, and we, you know, we I can recognize that, but just based on what I think they were trying to do, I think it was a nice sort of way to round off the story as well. Like, I don't think you kind of end it any other way than have her be, not only realize the error of her ways, but also be like, you all look amazing, and you all are amazing, and you put so much effort into being you. It's so lovely to see, and I just want everybody to share this moment. I think that's kind of the perfect way to end it, that kind of encapsulates what the film was about.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, is there anything else, Jess, on Mean Girls?
I think I've covered everything.
You good? All right then. Well, at the end of the Facts on Film episode, we like to rate our films and how well we think they represented fat bodies and other body diversities. And we like to rate them out of ourselves. So out of 5 possible Jesses, what will you give Mean Girls for fat representation?
I'm gonna give it a 2.5 or 3.
Ooh, okay.
I'm gonna go 2.5.
Okay.
Can I do a half? Is that allowed?
Oh, absolutely, it's allowed, yes.
2.5. The reason I'm going to give it a 2.5 is because it has a really good ensemble cast representation going on in the background, but it loses points because of stereotypes. And I think it is relatable to the teenage girl experience ultimately. But if it just did it in a way that wasn't perpetuating diet culture, but instead was calling it out, I think it would be a lot higher up on the Jesses.
Yes, I 100% agree with that. I'm going to give it a 2 Hannahs, and I've got 2 reasons for that. Those 2 Hannahs. So one of them is actually Damien, and one of them is the last scene, the like happy yay everyone gets with the tiara scene. I think they're great. I love, and I am very excited to see how they translate that for a modern audience in the adaptation coming out next year. But yes, I agree with the diet culture is insidious. I hate the body shaming scene. I hate the way that how they treat Regina, and I hate how they perpetuate that the idea of your body size is equated to your social status. It's gross. I know Tina Fey didn't mean for us to take that literally, but I was so young when I watched this. I definitely did.
Yeah. I know you didn't mean to say that thing, but
yeah, like it's like intent doesn't like negate consequence, you know.
Yeah.
So 2.5 Jesses, 2 Hannahs. That's not actually a bad score. We've had zeros before, so we're doing all right. Okay, Jess, thank you so much for coming on the pod, and I very much appreciate your insight into a world I just don't have visibility into, which is the acting world. And thank you so much for bringing that forward, and just your nuance and your insight was very well received. Can you please let me and the listeners know where they can find you and more of your work?
So you can follow me on Twitter if it still exists. We hope we see Jess _Rolland. You can follow me on Instagram at Jess Rolland, and then I also have a podcast called Better Than Bad, which is basically where we take an actor or a director's highest rated film and their lowest rated film, and we watch them and decide which one we prefer, because sometimes we have bad taste. And you can follow that podcast on Better Bad Pod, on Twitter and Instagram. Always looking for guests. Hannah, if you want to come on, please feel free.
No, like genuinely, my first instinct, because I absolutely love this actor with my entire being, but I know he's done some shite, is David Tennant.
We haven't had David Tennant. This is great.
Oh my god, no! Like, anyone who knows me in real life will know how much I love this man, but like he has done shit, and I would love to talk about it.
If you want to, come on.
Yes, we need to organize that.
And if anyone listening wants to come on to that podcast, let me know. I'm taking a little break at the moment, but coming back to it in sort of September time. So that's where you can find me, and I post some acting stuff every so often on like different socials on my Instagram and whatnot. So if you want to see whether I actually can act, I wasn't just speaking out of my arse, then you can find that out on Instagram.
Yes, we'll all go over and we'll all critique, we'll all pretend to be critics. No, thank you so much, Jess, and I will make sure that all you've just said below will be linked in the show notes to make it super easy for the listeners to find you. And then the listeners can find the podcast at Fats on Film on Twitter and Instagram, and now TikTok. I created a TikTok for the podcast, yay! And then you can find myself at Queen Bee Says on Twitter, TikTok and Instagram as well. Thank you so much for listening, everyone, and I'll see you at the next one. And remember to stay fat. Yay!